Hi, my name is Gibson, and I am the owner and founder of the Personal Development School of Toronto. You can find the Personal Development School of Toronto at www.personaldevelopmentschool.com. And if you receive a lot of value from this daily breakthrough video that you're about to watch, please like, subscribe, and share this with other people. So today I want to discuss this idea of self-sacrifice. We see a lot of people who declare themselves to be so selfless, or that they're people who always get taken advantage of, or that they are, chronic self-sacrificers in a way. And I really want to go into this for a minute because it's something that's unquestioned, and it's often an extremely unhealthy pattern where we're sort of missing the mark on what's actually going on. So there's no actual such thing as self-sacrifice. It's basically a subconscious strategy that's happening to get a different need met. So whether you believe you're self-sacrificing for somebody else, or when you believe you're self-sacrificing for somebody else, it's actually a very unhealthy pattern. And if you're calling yourself a self-sacrificer or overgiver, chances are you're actually struggling with a subconscious fear of rejection or abandonment. So we'll get to all this in a second too, I'll explain this. So here's what the pattern sort of looks like. You can think of the pattern as being this: I overgive, and because I overgive and perceive in my relationships that things are then out of balance, it creates breeding grounds for resentment. So I overgive and then I resent. And because of that resentment, I create all of this negative emotion. I bottle it up, and eventually it explodes, either through passive aggressiveness, spitefulness, or literally an explosive anger, because I just can't take it anymore. And then I feel guilty for eliciting that emotional response. And so I go back to overgiving. So we have this sort of chronic perpetual habit or cycle of overgiving, resenting, feeling spiteful or passive aggressive, blowing up, feeling guilty for blowing up, and going back to overgiving. And then we just go through and through the cycle. Now, if this really resonates with you, chances are there's some really good work for you to be doing here. So the actual reason that you're likely doing this is not because you're so empathic, although that might be true as well. It's probably true as well, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But the reason is that you're struggling with competing needs. So you have this need to protect yourself from the pain of feeling rejected, abandoned, unworthy, unimportant, not needed, whatever it might be. This fear of disappointing people, and the need to protect yourself from the pain that comes with that, versus the need to actually speak up about what you want. And because this pain is so great, and because our brain is hardwired to seek pleasure over pain, our brain goes, whoa, there's too much pain here. We'd rather avoid this pain of feeling unimportant or unneeded or guilty for disappointing other people than we would feel this pain of not speaking up. So we choose to not speak up so we can avoid the pain of feeling guilty for disappointing people, or feeling that we're going to be rejected for disappointing somebody's expectations or whatever. Now, I'm going to help you find exactly what it is for you, because it's sort of a broad category, but everybody sort of fits within a certain boundary there. So you basically need to let number one win because you're protecting yourself from pain, which means your self-sacrifice isn't necessarily as self-sacrificial as you think. It's actually a form of subconscious self-protection. So oftentimes the person that struggles with this pattern is also somebody who experienced maybe a parent or a caregiver or a close family member or friend going through strong negative emotion in childhood, and felt like they couldn't fix that need, couldn't fix that person's pain, and felt disconnected because that person was in pain and they couldn't reach them. And so that carries on into adult life, thinking that, okay, if I can fix people's pain, then I can reconnect, and then I'll be loved, or then I'll be needed or important. Or they felt guilty that they couldn't fix the person's pain. And so it became, oh my gosh, I have to always go above and beyond to try to fix people's pain now, because I am trying to alleviate that subconsciously stored guilt from my childhood. Okay, so this doesn't come from a negative place or a martyr-like place. This comes from a deep wound that needs to be acknowledged and transformed. So the challenge then is not that you're such an overgiver and that everybody takes advantage of you. The challenge is that you have deeply disguised fears embedded in your subconscious mind that are emerging as patterns that society is also reinforcing as being kind or selfless. So I'm going to say it again because I want that to make really good sense. It's an important point. So you have this pattern that's a deeply subconscious fear. And because that fear elicits a behavioral response that's self-sacrificial, and because society says, oh, it's so good to be selfless and that's so kind and caring, it's really hard to find that you have this subconscious fear. It's like deeply embedded, and it's kind of being positively reinforced by society. So being overly nice to other people, and this is an important point to remember, it does not mean sacrificing yourself in the process. It does not mean, not speaking up for what you need so that you can just sidestep the fear of rejection, abandonment, or guilt. Okay, it means that you have a deeply rooted fear around rejection, abandonment, or guilt, and those things need to be addressed. Ultimately, we want to be making decisions from a place where two people can have their needs met. And it is from this place that beautiful things happen. And it's from this place that we're also encouraged to develop a higher level of communication and vulnerability in expressing our needs, which then connects us more deeply to other people. Okay, there's a quote I heard once, and it said, service is not sacrifice. And I thought that was a good quote. Now, again, just to be really clear, sacrifice is not really self-sacrifice. It's literally a fear of something underneath. So what is the solution? Well, the solution is multi-layered in a sense. First and foremost, the solution is really getting in touch with your own feelings and needs. So in the moment you go to express a boundary, the chronic overgiver, okay, is often much more in touch with other people's feelings than their own feelings. And this is the skill of attunement that they've mastered. Attunement to other people's needs, essentially being in touch with other people's needs and emotions almost more than their own, so that they can protect themselves from this deeply hardwired wound of disappointing people, or feeling, the wound of feeling guilty for disappointing somebody, or feeling unimportant because they couldn't meet somebody's needs, or feeling unwanted, or whatever it might be. So you have to work on these underlying fears. Okay, so the two parts become, can I get in touch better with my feelings and needs moment to moment? Because I'm probably more naturally in touch with the feelings and needs of others than my own, and I have to balance out that equation. And secondly, working on the underlying fears themselves. So actually working through the fears of abandonment. So I'm going to give you a few brief points on how to do this. You'll see a lot of videos and information about subconscious reprogramming of patterns in other videos. I'm just going to touch briefly on it right now. So one of the first things that you can do to start getting in touch with your feelings and needs is to start using your emotions as guidance. Your emotions are just there to wake you up, and they're there to tell you that you have a need that's unmet, or that you're having a story that you're telling yourself that's causing you pain. It can come in a variety of forms, but start asking yourself throughout the day, what do I feel and what do I need? And if you can just start doing that one thing, you will start to develop a sense of connection to yourself, which then you can recognize what you're actually feeling and needing in the moment, which then of course gives you the opportunity to properly speak up. So that's one. Again, because the empath is the empath or chronic overgiver, they tend to be in the same box of patterning. And of course, the empath tends to just naturally be more in touch with the feelings of others than their own. So what do I feel and what do I need? Secondly, ask yourself, you want to look for what the underlying fear is. Like what exactly am I afraid of? Is it the fear of feeling guilty for not meeting somebody's needs because I was guilted in childhood when I couldn't, or I felt like I was disappointing people? Is it the fear of being rejected if I don't meet somebody's needs because I had experiences in early life where when I couldn't meet somebody's needs, I was then rejected for it, or made to feel like I wasn't good enough, or disowned, or unimportant, or something of that sort? And if that's the case, can I equilibrate that now in my adult life? Okay, so how you would find this exactly is basically to go into a situation mentally. Think of a situation where you didn't speak up for yourself, or generalize it and think, okay, if I didn't speak up for myself, what am I so afraid would have happened? Or what am I so afraid will happen if I don't speak up for myself? And keep asking yourself this until you find the answer that you can feel in your body. So you might feel, well, I'm first afraid that I will feel like a bad person if I don't meet my friend or partner's needs. And if I feel like a bad person, I feel really guilty. And you might feel that strong pain, okay? Or it could be, again, I fear that I will be rejected, or I fear that I will be pushed away, or I feel that I'll be disregarded, or it could be any number of things. Look for what it is. And when you keep asking yourself the question, what am I afraid will happen? And you can keep going through that cycle. So I'm afraid that I will feel guilty. And then what? What are you afraid will happen if you feel guilty? Well, then I'm afraid after that I'll seem like a bad person, and then I'll be disowned or rejected. Trace it down until, again, you find that deep feeling in your body of like, oh, that really scares me, and I can see that that's a core wound for me. And again, you'll feel that fear. And remember this as well, when you're not meeting somebody's needs, chances are you're probably just not meeting their expectations of you. And expectations are always that individual's problem who has them. So for example, if let's say that you've had a really hard week and you've got a million things to do, and you've got, reports due for work in the morning, and you've got 1,000,001 tasks ahead of you, and your friend calls you and says, I need to talk. And let's say, a healthy boundary would say, okay, great, I've got a lot on my plate. I'm happy to talk, but I really only have 15 minutes. And let's say the person just goes on and oversteps your boundary, and you find yourself not speaking up. And so you don't sleep well, and you don't turn in your work in time for work the next day, and all these different things. In that moment, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid that you'll disappoint the person and you won't meet their needs? And then what? Then that they will feel frustrated by you or blame you for their problems. You'll feel like a bad person, or that they'll reject you, abandon you, etc. And then recognize that if they expect you to be there through and through 24/7, chances are they have unreasonable expectations of you. And chances are they're also displacing some of their power to work on things themselves, and making you the enabler of not doing that, because they always go to you and they're not developing that relationship or those tools to work through things on their own. So I don't want to drag this out for too much longer, but you might find instead that so then once you've recognized these fears, can you feel this fear and practice speaking up anyways? Okay, this would be an exposure response tool, which means you basically teach your mind that, hey, it's actually okay. Nothing terrible really happened when I did just go ahead and make a different conscious decision to change this pattern. And as you do this over time, your brain learns that this response is safe, and you're not actually reliving all these wounds you're so afraid of. And so you can break down these barriers of old patterns. That would be one way, or sort of a third way there. Also, if you can find what you're so afraid of, I'm afraid that I'll disappoint somebody, I'll be rejected, abandoned, etc. Reprogramming wise, you can just change the story. Question the story. I'll be abandoned. Can I really know that this is true? And is there any proof for how I won't be abandoned? And can I actually find proof of people who do speak up and do establish their boundaries and they're not abandoned? And so what I'm doing is I'm internally and emotionally teaching my brain that, hey, what you're believing and holding on to is in fact not a complete story, not a complete truth. And by neutralizing that, by seeing proof of how other situations do occur, you can sort of work through that pattern. So again, check any videos I have on reprogramming. This will explain this in great detail. Also, a few other key points to remember is that every single person who's a taker is really just a mirror to your stored unconscious fear, trying to help you bring it to the surface. So people who say, oh, I always get taken advantage of, well, they're actually a mirror of you, because they're mirroring how you take advantage of yourself to try to please other people. So the moment you feel taken advantage of, realize that it was you that took advantage of you to please other people so you could run away from your own unconscious fears. Okay? Everybody's a mirror. The universe is a mirror, especially for any charged judgment that you have specifically. And also, remember that if you don't correct this pattern, you will swing from empath to narcissist, or from, chronic overgiver to having to be a desperate taker. Why? Because eventually you will take your cup that has your stored energy for the day, and you will deplete it, give it all away, be showing up half full the next day because you didn't recharge or replenish yourself, and you were over giving and under receiving. And so you're out of balance in terms of the universal law of giving and receiving. And because you kept over giving and under receiving, eventually you ran dry, resource-wise. That could be physical resource, spiritual, mental, emotional. And you were forced to become a taker. And if you look closely, you will see these patterns in your life of overgiving, and then having to receive out of desperation. And so even though we think that this pattern serves and it works and all these different things, the truth is that it doesn't. You're always going to run into challenges at some point and have to go back to being the taker. So please realize that even though you think this is helping you avoid the pain of having to feel guilty or disappoint somebody or be abandoned, it's actually not. That will come. You'll have to face that fear in due time anyways. And lastly, can you practice nurturing and connecting to yourself enough so that you don't need external approval? Can you practice developing such a strong relationship to yourself and your own approval that you're not seeking it externally, and you're not putting so much weight on meeting other people's expectations of you? Because if you are, chances are you're out of balance in terms of feeling good enough and worthy enough and whole enough as an individual. And there's work to be done in nurturing the relationship to yourself, because whatever we don't feel complete with internally, we naturally seek externally. So the external seeking is a symptom of an internal imbalance. Okay? So I hope this was helpful. I could talk more and more about this for quite some time, so I'm sure I'll do other videos about this in the future, but this is just an initial start of a recognition of these patterns and how to start breaking these perceptual filters that are causing these repetitive patterns that create pain. Thank you so much for watching. If you received value from this and want to learn more, please like, share, and subscribe to these videos.